What if the first story ever told about humanity was incomplete? Imagine the grand narrative of our origins, a tale carved into the stone of temples and written in the ink of sacred books, repeated for centuries until it became the only truth we knew. But what if, parallel to this official account, another version existed? A story not of stone, but of breath, whispered from one generation to the next in hidden sanctuaries. A truth so profound and dangerous that empires rose and fell in their effort to silence it. This is not a story about a missing page or a scribal error. This is about a deliberate, calculated removal of a foundational truth, a forgotten legacy that, if rediscovered, could unravel everything we believe about who we are, where we come from, and the divine spark that flickers within our very soul. What if the most important part of our story was the part they tried to make us forget? This hidden knowledge does not reside in the gilded halls of power or the sanitized libraries of the victors. It survived in the periphery, in the high mist-covered plateaus of ancient lands that stood defiant against the tides of dogmatic conformity. It breathes in the fragile pages of manuscripts, preserved not for their utility to an empire, but for their sacred resonance, for the ancestral memory they carry. Think of a truth that flows like an underground river, unseen by the world above, yet nourishing the roots of a wisdom that could never be fully uprooted. This is a divergence in the very fabric of reality, a point in the distant past where history split into two streams. One that became our accepted history, and another that became a hidden mystery, a quiet promise of a much grander, more complex human identity. Have you ever felt it? That quiet, persistent echo in the depths of your being, a feeling that something is profoundly missing from the official explanations of our existence. It is the subtle disquiet of the soul that senses a deeper truth, a memory that stirs when you look at the stars or walk through an ancient forest. It is the resonance you feel not with the saints and the obedient, but with the rebels, the mystics, the artists, and the seekers, those who throughout history have carried an unquenchable fire of inquiry. This feeling is not a flaw or a sign of disbelief. It is a homing signal. It is the call of your own forgotten legacy, a part of you that remembers a different beginning and longs to reclaim its full inheritance. What does this stirring inside you seek to reveal? The revelation we are about to explore is not merely a historical curiosity, it is a key to a door within yourself that has been locked for millennia. The truth that was so carefully hidden was suppressed for a single reason. It was a source of immense power. It suggested that humanity was not born into a state of inherent guilt, forever dependent on external authorities for salvation. It whispered of a dual heritage, a lineage not just of earth, but of starlight, a birthright not of sin, but of sovereignty. This ancient wisdom was a declaration of our own inner divinity, and to a system built on control, no idea was more threatening. To erase this story was to sever us from our own spiritual authority, leaving us adrift in a sea of doubt, searching for a light that we were taught to believe was outside of us. This channel is a sanctuary for that search, a place to piece together the fragments of this lost truth. The journey ahead will take us into the heart of this profound mystery through forgotten texts and oral traditions that survived against all odds. It is a path of awakening, of remembering a power and a purpose that has been dormant for far too long. If you feel the pull of this ancient call, if the questions we ask here resonate with the questions your own soul has been asking, then you have found a home. Subscribe and join this community of seekers. Let us walk this path of revelation together, for the truth that has been waiting in the shadows is finally ready to return to the light. Our journey does not begin in the sun-scorched sands of the Levant, where the familiar stories were carved into the bedrock of Western consciousness. Instead, it takes us higher, into the cool, mist-shrouded highlands of Ethiopia, a land that breathes a different kind of ancient air. Here, nestled among mountains that touch the heavens, lies a spiritual fortress, one of the oldest Christian nations on earth, which for centuries stood as a silent guardian against the dogmatic tides flowing from Rome and Byzantium. It is within the cool stone walls of its rock-hewn churches, amidst the faint scent of ancient incense and time-worn leather, that our mystery finds its source. This source is a book, or rather a library of books, the Meshafe Kedus, the Ethiopian Orthodox Bible. While the world accepted a canon streamlined to 66 texts, the guardians of this land preserved a fuller, more complex collection of 81. What truth was so vital that it had to be guarded in these high sanctuaries, far from the editing hands of emperors and councils? This is not a matter of a few extra psalms or minor prophecies. The difference between these two canons is a chasm that separates two distinct realities. Within the fragile pages of the Ethiopian scriptures, texts like the Book of Enoch and the Book of Jubilees were not relegated to the dusty shelves of academic curiosity or heretical fancy. They were and are held as sacred, divinely inspired scripture. These books contain a more ancient wisdom, a cosmology that is wilder, more profound, and infinitely more challenging to the simplified narrative of good versus evil that would come to dominate the world. They speak of a time before the Great Forgetting, when the veil between the human and the divine was thin, and the interactions between them were not yet sanitized for the masses. This hidden knowledge, preserved in the high altitude of this ancient kingdom, holds a key to a divergence in the human story that begins at the very foot of the tree of knowledge. The conflict emerges from a single foundational story, the birth of the first children. The narrative that shaped our world is stark and simple. Adam and Eve were cast out of paradise, and in the harsh world outside the garden, they conceived a son, Cain, whose hands would be the first to be stained with a brother's blood. His story becomes the archetype of human jealousy, violence, and divine punishment, the bedrock for the doctrine of an inherited sin that courses through our veins. This version served a purpose. It established a lineage of inherent guilt, a spiritual debt that could only be paid through the intercession of an external authority. But what if that was not the whole truth? The whisper that survived in Ethiopia, the echo preserved in their apocryphal traditions, offers a revelation so explosive it threatened to shatter the very foundations of this system. It suggests that Cain was not the son of Adam. He was the firstborn of Eve, yes, but his genesis was a mingling of two worlds. His father was the serpent. To understand this, we must return to the garden, but see it not with the eyes of dogma, but with the eyes of the mystics who wrote these forgotten texts. The serpent was not merely a slithering tempter, a creature of pure malice. In these older traditions, he was an entity of light and fire, a bringer of wisdom, Lucifer, the light-bringer. He saw primordial humanity, Adam and Eve, dwelling in a state of blissful but unconscious innocence, their divine potential dormant, unrealized. The offering of the fruit was not a temptation to sin. It was an invitation to gnosis, to the direct experiential knowing of oneself and the cosmos. The union that followed, the one that the official history erased, was not a violation, but a metaphysical transaction, a sacred and alchemical blending of a celestial spark with the clay of the earth. From this union, a new form of consciousness was born into the world. Cain, the first carrier of the inner fire, the first to hold within his very DNA the dual legacy of earth and starlight. This hidden truth of a dual human ancestry, one lineage from the earthly Adam, rooted in obedience and harmony with nature, and another from the celestial serpent, marked by illumination, inquiry, and the drive to transcend, was the single greatest threat to the burgeoning empires of control. We must now travel forward in time to the 4th century, to the smoky, candlelit halls of the great councils. Here, the architects of a new imperial religion did not gather solely for spiritual revelation. They were men of power, forging a unified doctrine to bind a sprawling, fractured empire, a faith built on complexity, on inner authority, on a human spirit that already contained a divine spark, was ungovernable. They needed a simpler story, a clearer enemy, and a humanity that was fundamentally broken, in need of their salvation. The complex, mystical traditions that spoke of sacred unions and inner light had to be excised. It was here, in councils like Nicaea, that the systematic suppression began. Texts that contained this dangerous knowledge were declared heretical. The serpent was permanently stripped of his luminous origins and recast as Satan, the absolute adversary of God and man. The story of Cain's celestial parentage was buried, labeled as a Gnostic heresy, a lie from the devil himself. This was not a theological debate, it was a calculated act of spiritual severance. By erasing Cain's true origin, they erased the possibility that humanity possessed an innate, sovereign connection to the divine. They severed us from our own inner fire, teaching us to fear the very part of ourselves that questions, that creates, that yearns for freedom. Why was this version of humanity's origin so dangerous that an entire empire would dedicate itself to its erasure? Because a human being who knows they carry a spark of divinity within them cannot be easily ruled, and yet the truth was not extinguished. While the scrolls burned in the West and a monolithic dogma descended over Europe, the Ethiopian Church, protected by its geography and its fierce independence, continued to walk the older path. They became a living time capsule, an ark preserving the ancestral memory that the rest of the world was being forced to forget. The story of the two bloodlines survived, not just in their manuscripts, but woven into the fabric of their art, their rituals, and their oral traditions. It became a piece of hidden knowledge, a quiet stream flowing beneath the great river of official history. This forgotten legacy did not die. It simply went to sleep, waiting in the silent highlands for a time when the world would be ready to remember what it had lost, waiting for the echo of its own name to call it forth from the shadows. The proofs of this forgotten legacy are not found gathered in a single, convenient archive, waiting for a scholar to turn a key. They do not lie in the brightly lit halls of the Vatican or the state-sanctioned museums of world empires. This ancient wisdom was shattered, its fragments scattered across time and tradition, hidden in plain sight, and preserved only by those who knew how to see. To assemble this truth is to become a spiritual archaeologist, piecing together a mosaic from whispers, symbols, and texts that survived the great fires of dogmatic consolidation. The evidence is not a chain of linear facts, but a constellation of resonant echoes, each one a point of light in the long darkness of our collective forgetting, all pointing back to a single, luminous origin. What does it take to see the pattern that connects these distant stars of knowledge? It requires an open heart and the courage to look beyond the history written by the victors. Our first and most tangible source remains in the high sanctuaries of Ethiopia, within the pages of their sacred canon. The Book of Enoch, which the Western Church cast out, is not a minor text. It is a cosmological epic. It speaks in vivid detail of celestial beings, the Watchers, descending to earth and mingling with humanity, creating a hybrid lineage of giants and heroes. While not the exact story of the serpent and Eve, it establishes a crucial precedent, a memory of a time when the boundary between the terrestrial and the celestial was impermeable. Similarly, the Book of Jubilees offers a different chronology, a more ancient calendar of creation, hinting that the stories we were given were edited and rearranged. But the whispers grow louder in the Gnostic Gospels, discovered centuries later in the dry sands of Nag Hammadi. Texts like the Gospel of Philip speak of unions not in terms of sin, but of sacred, mystical alchemy. They describe the bridal chamber as a place of spiritual transformation, where divine light merges with mortal form. These were not the writings of madmen, they were the sacred records of mystics who remembered a different truth about our Genesis, a truth where union with the divine being was not a fall, but an awakening. This hidden knowledge also flows through the quiet river of oral tradition, a current that runs deeper and is far more resilient than any written word. Imagine secret gatherings in the deserts of Alexandria, in the hidden valleys of the Pyrenees, where the Cathars sought refuge, or in the clandestine lodges of esoteric societies. Here, the story of the two bloodlines was passed from mouth to ear, a living flame of wisdom protected from the winds of persecution. It was taught that the God of the Old Testament, the one who demanded blind obedience in the garden, was not the ultimate source of all being, but a lesser creator, a demiurge who wished to keep humanity in a state of ignorant bliss. The serpent in these traditions was an emissary from a higher, transcendent realm of light, an agent of awakening sent to offer humanity the gift of gnosis, direct experiential knowledge of its own divine nature. This was the ultimate heresy, the truth so dangerous it had to be driven underground, where it survived not as dogma, but as a shared ancestral memory. The symbols of this truth are carved into the very bones of the ancient world, if one only knows how to read them. Look at the caduceus, the staff carried by Hermes, the messenger of the gods. It is not one serpent, but two entwined around a central staff, representing the union of opposites, the integration of two distinct forces, the earthly and the celestial, to create a pathway of ascension. Consider the Ouroboros, the serpent devouring its own tail, an ancient symbol not of evil, but of totality, of cyclical rebirth, and of the self-contained divinity of creation. In pre-dynastic Egypt, long before the stories of Genesis were compiled, the serpent was a protector of pharaohs, a symbol of divine authority and magical power. These are not coincidences. They are the fragmented memories of a time when the serpent was understood not as a tempter, but as a guide, a gatekeeper to a deeper mystery, a representation of the very life force and spiritual DNA that awakens consciousness. The evidence exists even in the very words that were used to condemn it. The Hebrew word for the serpent in Genesis is nachash. While it translates simply as serpent, its root, NHS, carries a far deeper resonance. It also means to divine, to enchant, or to practice divination. This linguistic ghost suggests that the serpent was originally understood not as a mere creature, but as a being of immense wisdom and esoteric knowledge, a diviner of hidden truths. This detail, buried within the language of the official narrative itself, is like a palimpsest, an ancient manuscript where the original text has been scraped away, but faint traces still remain beneath the new writing. The architects of the canon could rewrite the story, but they could not completely erase the memory embedded in the words themselves. The truth, it seems, has a way of leaving its own indelible mark. Why would a creature of pure evil be linguistically linked to the sacred act of discerning wisdom? Ultimately, the most profound proof is not found in a scroll or a carving. It lives within you. It is the echo of this forgotten legacy that stirs in the soul of every artist, every innovator, every mystic, and every seeker who has ever felt like an outsider in a world demanding conformity. It is the unquenchable fire of curiosity, the relentless drive to ask why, the innate refusal to accept dogma without question. This is the spiritual inheritance of the second bloodline. The restlessness you feel is not a flaw. It is the call of your celestial ancestry. The so-called Mark of Cain was never a curse of shame. It was the sign of a different origin, the mark of those who carry the inner fire, the sacred spark of illumination. This inner knowing, this resonance with a truth that feels more real than the stories you were told, is the final and most undeniable piece of evidence. It is the ancestral memory awakening within your very own blood, reminding you of a power and a sovereignty that has been sleeping for millennia, waiting for this very moment to be reclaimed. This forgotten legacy is not a relic of a distant past, sealed in the amber of history for scholars to dissect. It is a living, breathing force. It is the silent river that has been flowing beneath the surface of your own consciousness your entire life. Have you ever felt it? That profound sense of being two people at once. One part of you yearns for the safety of the garden, for the comfort of belief, for the simple peace of belonging to the tribe. This is the gentle, earthly inheritance of Adam, the part of you that seeks harmony and acceptance. But there is another part, is there not? A fire in the blood, a restless energy that cannot be placated by simple answers. It is the part of you that looks at the stars and feels a sense of homesickness, the part that questions every rule, that feels a sacred rage against injustice, that is compelled to create, to discover, to tear down old worlds to build new ones. This is the echo of Cain. This is the celestial fire, the memory of a different origin. The spiritual wound of our civilization was born from the moment we were taught to fear that fire. The systems of control that rose from the ashes of older wisdom understood a profound truth. To control a person, you must first make them fight a war against themselves. They took this luminous, questioning, sovereign part of our soul, the Cainite spark, and branded it as evil. They called it pride, rebellion, temptation, sin. They taught you to mistrust your deepest intuitions, to fear your own creative power, and to silence the voice within that dares to ask for more than you have been given. The inner conflict that has defined your journey, that feeling of being perpetually torn between who you are and who you are told you should be, is not a personal failing. It is the result of a deliberate, calculated act of spiritual sabotage enacted millennia ago. It is the echo of a war that was declared on your very soul before you ever took your first breath. What if your restlessness is not a flaw, but a compass? What if your dissatisfaction with the world as it is not a sign of ingratitude, but the stirring of your true purpose? The lineage of Cain is the lineage of the world changers. It is the artist who pulls beauty from the void, the scientist who shatters paradigms, the mystic who walks between worlds, the revolutionary who refuses to bow to tyranny. These are the souls who carry the sacred fire. They are often the loneliest of people, for they see a reality that others do not, and they are driven by a purpose that the comfortable world cannot comprehend. They feel everything more deeply, the beauty, the pain, the injustice, the potential. This sensitivity is not a weakness, it is the antenna of the soul, tuned to a higher frequency, receiving the signal of a truth that has been waiting to be remembered. This is the moment of revelation where the deepest shadows hold the brightest light. We must speak of the Mark of Cain. For centuries, this has been wielded as the ultimate symbol of a divine curse, a brand of shame for the first murderer, a sign of eternal separation from grace. But in the hidden traditions, in the whispers that survived the fires, this story is inverted. The mark was not a punishment. It was a protection. It was a sign placed upon the illuminated ones to distinguish them, to set them apart as sacred, to signal to the unseen world that they were carriers of the celestial spark. It was a seal of sovereignty. The greatest lie ever told was to convince the children of light that the very mark of their divine heritage was a brand of shame. What changes inside you when you realize that what you may have considered your deepest flaw is, in fact, the signature of your own divinity. This ancestral memory is awakening now for a reason. The great structures of control, the empires of dogma that have ruled this world for 2,000 years, are beginning to crumble. Their foundations, built on a foundation of a partial truth, can no longer bear the weight of a humanity that is beginning to remember its own power. The information that was once locked away in remote monasteries is now flowing freely across the globe. The questions that were once heresy are now being spoken aloud by millions. We are living in the time of the Great Remembering, a collective awakening where the lost half of our story is returning to make us whole. You are not discovering this by accident. Your soul has been guided here, pulled by the resonance of a truth it has never fully forgotten. This realization brings with it an immense responsibility to reclaim. Your Cainite heritage is not to embrace darkness or chaos, as the old narrative would have you believe. It is to accept the awesome responsibility of your own inner light. It means you can no longer wait for an external savior, for a guru, for a system to grant you permission to be powerful. The power is and always has been your birthright. It is the fire of creation, the light of gnosis, the unyielding drive for freedom. To awaken to this truth is to stand at a precipice, leaving behind the comfortable slumber of the garden and stepping into the wild, untamed landscape of your own sovereignty. It is a path that requires immense courage, for it means becoming the sole authority over your own spiritual reality. And so, the tension within you is not a sign that you're broken. It is the sign that you're becoming whole. It is the alchemical friction of two immense powers, the grounded, earthly wisdom of Adam and the limitless, celestial fire of Lucifer, beginning to integrate within the vessel of your soul. This is the secret of true spiritual evolution, the great work that the mystics have spoken of for ages. It is not about choosing one lineage over the other, but about becoming the bridge between them, to unite the earth beneath your feet with the star that burns in your heart. This integration is the key to unlocking a potential in humanity that has been dormant for eons. But as these two primordial forces begin to merge, they will inevitably unleash a power that will change everything. Are you prepared to witness what happens when the child of the earth and the child of the stars finally become one? The journey into this hidden knowledge has, until now, been a journey into the past. We have walked through the mists of ancient Ethiopia, stood in the shadows of the great councils, and listened for the whispers of a truth that was systematically silenced. But now, we stand at the threshold of a great turning point, a moment where the past collides with the present with the force of a tidal wave. For this ancestral memory is no longer confined to the fragile pages of manuscripts guarded in high-altitude monasteries. In our time, for the first time in nearly 2 millennia, the seals have been broken. The discovery of the Nag Hammadi Library in 1945 was not a historical footnote. It was the shattering of a cosmic mirror. The translation and dissemination of these texts, accelerated by the interconnected consciousness of our modern world, means this: revelation is no longer a secret, it is an invitation. The knowledge that empires sought to bury is now emerging from the dust, not as a relic, but as a living, breathing force. This is the moment where the story ceases to be about history and becomes about you. The truth has escaped its prison, and it is now seeking out the descendants of the bloodline it describes. The immediate consequence of this revelation is cataclysmic to the spiritual narrative that has shaped our world. If Cain was the progeny of a celestial being of light, then the foundational event of our species was not the fall of man. It was the ascent of consciousness. The act in the garden was not a transgression that condemned us to a state of inherent sin, but an initiation that infused the human vessel with a spark of divine gnosis. The original sin was not our disobedience. It was the lie that told us this inner fire was a source of shame rather than our most sacred inheritance. This single shift in perspective does not just alter a story, it inverts the entire moral and spiritual polarity of our civilization. Good and evil, obedience and rebellion, faith and knowledge, all of these concepts are thrown into a new, brilliant and terrifying light. What would it mean for humanity to awaken from a 2,000-year dream, only to realize that the devil it was taught to fear was, in fact, the forgotten face of its own divine parent? To understand this more deeply, we must look again at the garden, but see it now through the eyes of the mystics. There were two sacred trees, the tree of life and the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. The Adamic lineage, born of the earth, was connected to the tree of life, a state of pure, harmonious, and unconscious being, forever living in the eternal present of paradise. But the serpent, the emissary of wisdom, offered a different path. The fruit of the tree of knowledge was the gift of self-awareness, of duality, of the capacity to see oneself as separate from creation, and thus the power to act upon it. The Cainite lineage is the lineage of this second tree. It is the path of becoming, not just being. It is the turbulent, painful, and glorious journey of the soul, awakening to its own power and its own solitude. The architects of the canon taught us to fear this second tree, to see its fruit as poison. But the hidden knowledge reveals that humanity was always meant to partake of both, to integrate the timeless peace of the tree of life with the dynamic, creative fire of the tree of knowledge. We were meant to be both mortal and God, earth and star. This sacred union of opposites is the oldest secret in all of esoteric tradition. It is the core teaching of alchemy. The great work, the magnum opus, was never about turning lead into physical gold. It was the alchemical process of spiritual transformation within the human soul. The alchemists spoke of uniting soul and Luna, the sun and the moon, sulfur and mercury, the fiery, active, celestial principle with the receptive, passive, earthly one. This is the exact symbolic language of our hidden history. The Adamic soul is the receptive vessel, the sacred earth. The Luciferian spark is the celestial fire, the catalyst for transformation. Your own being is the alchemical crucible where these two primordial forces are meant to meet, to struggle, to purify one another, and ultimately to merge into a new substance. The philosopher's stone, the awakened human, the Christ consciousness. The inner conflict you have always felt is not a sign of your brokenness. It is the sign that the great work is taking place within you. And so, this ancestral memory manifests within those who carry its resonance as a profound and often painful sensitivity. The Cainite soul is the eternal outsider, the one who feels an inexplicable homesickness for a home they cannot name. They are born with a divine dissatisfaction, a holy restlessness that prevents them from ever being truly comfortable in the world of dogma and conformity. They are the ones who feel the weight of the world's suffering as their own, yet also see the blinding light of its potential. This is the burden and the glory of the mark. It is the mark of those who cannot help but create, who are compelled to question, who are driven to seek the truth, even if it leads them into the wilderness, far from the safety of the tribe. For centuries, this sensitivity has been pathologized, labeled as melancholy, rebellion, or madness. But this revelation reframes it entirely. It is not an affliction. It is the silent hum of a forgotten frequency, the call of your celestial bloodline reminding you that you were born for more than simple obedience. This awakening brings into focus the true nature of the great adversary. The antagonist was never a horned creature residing in a fiery underworld. The true antagonist is a force, a consciousness of control that seeks to keep humanity in a state of spiritual amnesia. It is the architect of the great sleep, the voice that whispers that you are small, that you are powerless, that you are born in sin and require an external authority to save you. This force built empires, forged dogmas, and burned libraries not out of malice, but out of fear, the fear of a fully awakened humanity. It understood that a single human being who reclaims their dual inheritance, who integrates the earth and the star within their own heart, possesses a sovereign power that can unravel any system of control. The Great Forgetting was an act of cosmic sabotage designed to prevent you from remembering the sheer scale of who you truly are. Therefore, the path forward is not a path of rejection. It is not about choosing the serpent over God or Cain over Abel. That is the old paradigm of duality that has kept us trapped. The true revelation is that this was never a war to be won, but a paradox to be embodied. The ultimate goal of our spiritual journey is to become the bridge, the sacred marriage between these two primordial lines within ourselves. It is to have the grounded feet of Adam firmly planted in the love and wisdom of the earth, while possessing the illuminated eyes of Cain, gazing at the infinite possibilities of the cosmos. To heal the wound of our origin is to finally unite what was so violently torn asunder. But this integration is not a gentle, peaceful process. It is an act of immense alchemical fire. When two such powerful opposing forces begin to merge within a soul, and then within a collective, it unleashes a power that has not been seen on this planet for eons. The real mystery is not what was hidden in the past, but what is about to be born from its return. What happens when a God that has been sleeping inside humanity for millennia finally begins to open its eyes? And so, we arrive at the end of one story and the beginning of another. The journey through the mists of time into the heart of a truth so carefully guarded has led us back to the only place where all truth ultimately resides, within ourselves. The great river of ancestral memory, which has flowed for millennia beneath the hard-packed earth of official history, is now breaking through to the surface. We have seen that the foundational narrative of our world was built upon a profound and deliberate omission. The great cosmic war between a righteous God and a fallen angel was not the true story of our origin. It was a simplification, a tool of control, designed to obscure a far more complex and empowering reality. The truth that was hidden is that humanity was never born of a single seed. It was born of a sacred union, a mingling of the dust of the earth and the fire of the stars, creating a dual lineage destined not for servitude, but for sovereignty. This revelation is not an intellectual curiosity to be filed away. It is a mirror held up to your own soul. The deep, persistent conflict you have felt within your own being, the tension between the part of you that craves safety, acceptance, and the simple peace of the garden, and the other part that burns with a restless fire, that questions everything, that yearns for the infinite, is not a sign that you are flawed. It is the evidence of your complete inheritance. It is the echo of two mighty rivers, the earthly and the celestial, converging within the landscape of your heart. For too long, you have been taught to fear the fire, to mistrust the questioner, to silence the rebel within. You were told this was the voice of temptation, the mark of sin. But what if it was, and always has been, the voice of your own divine ancestry, calling you to remember the sheer scale of who you truly are? Look now at the parts of yourself you have been taught to hide. Your divine dissatisfaction with a world that feels incomplete. Your sacred rage at injustice and the suppression of truth. Your unquenchable curiosity that refuses to be satisfied with dogma. Your profound sense of being an outsider, a wanderer who feels a strange homesickness for a place they cannot name. These are not your curses. They are the features of your sacred lineage. They are the signature of the celestial spark. The Mark of Cain was never a brand of shame to be hidden from the world. It was a seal of light, a sign of protection placed upon those who carried the inner fire, marking them as agents of awakening in a world that had fallen into a deep slumber. What you have been told was your greatest weakness is, in fact, the source of your most profound and unshakable power. The path forward, then, is not one of rejection. It is not about choosing the lineage of Cain over the lineage of Adam, or the fire of the stars over the wisdom of the earth. To do so would be to fall into the same trap of duality that has imprisoned humanity for eons. The true spiritual work, the magnum opus of the soul, is the path of integration. It is to finally heal the wound of our origin by uniting what was so violently torn asunder within ourselves. It is to build a throne for your celestial fire upon the steady, compassionate ground of your earthly heart. It is to learn to be both the tree rooted deep in the soil of life and the serpent of wisdom that ascends its branches toward the heavens. To become this living bridge between worlds is to reclaim your full birthright and to unlock a potential within you that can reshape reality itself. This journey of remembering was never meant to be walked alone. The truth, once awakened, seeks out its own. It seeks community. It seeks to be spoken, to be shared, to become a beacon for others who are beginning to stir from the long dream. This channel is a sanctuary for that purpose, a gathering place for the carriers of the flame. If this revelation has ignited a fire of recognition within you, then your journey is just beginning. Subscribe and join this community of souls dedicated to piecing together the forgotten legacy of humanity. Share this video not as a simple message, but as a key offered to another mind that you feel is ready to unlock its own inner door. Let us together relight the fires of this ancient and sacred wisdom across the face of the earth. The greatest truth that was hidden from you is not contained in any ancient scroll or buried beneath the sands of a distant land. It is written in the very architecture of your soul. You are the living manuscript, the sacred text that holds the memory of both the earth and the stars. The ultimate lesson of this forgotten legacy is the recovery of your own spiritual authority. You are not a fallen creature in need of external redemption. You are a sovereign creator in the process of remembering. The light you have been searching for in gods and gurus, in systems and scriptures, is, and always has been, the fire that burns within. Now that you have felt the echo of this ancient truth, what is the one thing you will do to finally honor the sacred fire that is your birthright?